Hi, and welcome to Scouting for Growth. Today, I'm joined by my dear friend, Jay Weintraub. Jay, indeed, was the founder of InsureTech Connect that was sold to the client group a few years back. Today, Jay has a portfolio that consists of new events. He has a real estate tech event called Blueprint, a logistics tech event called Manifest, an age tech event called Medicarians, and with Cumulus, he's entering the agri and food tech. If there's a term that describes Jay for me, is that he's an event entrepreneur, actually. And Jay transformed his early digital marketing career into an industry-leading event shaper. He delivered 4 exits to date, and he's passionate to build events that connect people. And so that's why he built Connectiv, a portfolio of industry-defining events. While events are what the community seeks, Jay shares, he wants to serve unique experiences. He's also shared with me that success is not measured by the number of attendees or sponsors coming to an event. Instead, the team he has built at Connectiv judges themselves by the impact they make on the world's largest industry, the most complex ones too, and that is amazing. On this episode of Scouting for Growth, Jay and I will discuss Jay's main area of interest, post-InsureTech Connect. What is he focusing on those 4 industries and what purpose he's trying to fulfill? How does Jay serve sectors by delivering highly engaging conference experiences? And in a way, he also shares to me that it has to be face-to-face. So why? And what can we learn from cross-fertilizing lessons learned from one industry to the next, and actually attending numbers of events, from achieving, I guess, problem-solving benefits to collaborations as well. So if you are enjoying listening to this podcast, do not forget to subscribe to it, rate it, and provide a comment here below. If there's a topic that you feel needs addressing, just send me a message using the communication channel options listed below too. So let's welcome Jay. Hi, Jay.
Hi. Hello, Sabine.
I mean, it's been so long since I've been able to speak to you. So I'm just so excited to have you on Scouting for Growth.
Well, thank you. I'm very happy to be scouted.
Well, we are looking for scouting, which actually the term, means in the world of technology and venturing is about finding ventures. And, when you are doing a lot of the work with insurance companies, remember, we were looking for startup all the time. But then the second part is about investing and finding what I call transferability path. So investing, acquiring, partnering. So that's what we are trying to really talk about on the podcast, but also talking to entrepreneurs and great leaders like you, actually.
Thank you. Thank you. I was going to say I've done a fair amount of angel investing, which has really taught me that I should never be a VC. I like being friends with VCs, but I'm only here to dissuade people of the notion that angel investing is a good idea.
Really? Well, let's not go too deep yet, because let's do some intro.
Okay.
Tell us, who is Jay? Tell us about who you are, what you've done, how have you built one of the leading conference we know in the world, in our industry, and what are you doing now?
Thanks. So, it's certainly that many people know me from having been the co-founder of InsureTech Connect, right? It's how we met. I think back to, it must have been March in 2016. And, I'm at another event. It was the 10-year anniversary or something like that of an event that I had started and was no longer running. And I wanted to just see how the baby was doing. And we were connecting, and I remember being so stressed because you're in France and, well, I don't know, you weren't in France at the time. I mean, you must have been still in the UK. But I was thinking that like it was so noisy, and all I was told is Sabine's amazing. You really need to make a good impression. And I'm thinking, oh boy, I'm just going to blow it here because I'm trying to like have a meaningful conversation from an expo floor, which is impossible. So the fact that we're still here, 7+ years later, is truly delightful. Truly.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I remember we were chatting. You were on the conference floor. It was very noisy, and then we were chatting about different things and said, let's just catch up next week or a little bit later. And then we had great chat about what you wanted to achieve. So tell us, what has been the progress from the old to the new?
So if I think about when we first met, we had an idea and we said, we think that if we get a certain group of people together to care about insurance and innovation, transformation, remind you, this is a time when no one knew if the term was InsureTech with an E, without an E, if the term was InsTech, no one really knew, but it was, we believe that getting a group together could make a difference. And no one knows like what it means. And the beauty of an event is oftentimes you're trying to capture a movement. You're trying to find a point in time when the world is changing. And when that is, when there's so much uncertainty, then, FaceTime with the right people just adds an immense amount of value. So in many ways, while, most people have known me for InsureTech, when I think about the satisfaction and the joy, right? We created something that we're very proud of, something that is, grew to 7,000 people under our stewardship and has only grown since then. The joy was not just from working in insurance, it was really helping connect an industry and helping play some small part in the lives of people who are changing like the world. And so when I think about like what is today, today is, the idea of can we apply this craft and this passion of face-to-face for industries, but do it across multiple industries and do it across multiple industries simultaneously, right? In many ways, is there a playbook that, spans what are oftentimes seen as disparate industries? And so that is where we are today, 3 events live and 1 in development.
And so can you share with us what are those events, the new ones about?
Oh, of course. I was hoping you'd ask, but I figured if I tried to squeeze all of that in the last answer, I had just used up too much time. So today, the 3 events that we have is real estate tech, logistics tech, and I guess people might call it age tech, the whole senior health, wealth. And then the one that's in development is food and agriculture tech.
Nice. 4 of them. And it sounds that you're very much going into what I call the new industries, logistic, agri-tech, foods for food. I can see probably going into the new mode of eating, maybe no beef, technologies and stuff like that. Real estate, everybody now with the moving from working from offices to being remote working, I assume there's going to be probably with your real estate work, a bit of crossover with the future of work potentially as well.
Right, and crossover there, crossover with insurance. I mean, a lot of these industries, and that's what also was one of the magic things about insurance is you can't name, it's impossible to name something that insurance doesn't touch, right? If I'm sitting in, sort of like my home or my office, if I'm interacting with a product, if I'm in a car, driving a car, it is amazing to think that insurance touches everything. And so it is no surprise that the things that we touch today, there is always some insurance component to it. But usually, if you think about, let's use real estate tech as an example. What tends to happen, and I go back to the term of a movement, and the reason we use this term is that you can't define it. If you think about it, again, back to insurance, is the movement in InsureTech, was it about new products, new ways to underwrite, different ways to do claims? Was it back to sort of customer service or engagement? You didn't know how, it could be everything. And the question was, which one was right for you? Right? Real estate, we all touch it, see it. It's oftentimes highly regulated. It's very pen and paper. And in many cases, there's just new models of Like think about fractional ownership, or you think about things like Airbnb that has completely transformed hospitality, but it's not just hospitality, it's really about real estate. So how do you manage, sort of like your properties? If you're an investor, how do you invest in things that aren't just stocks, but how do you get new access to real estate? So all of these things have fascinating, sort of like implications that are, at the end of the day, yes, there's a tech component, but it's also a desire that says we have to do this differently.
So when are those events? When do you organize them? Because now you're running, I guess, once a year, 4 events. Am I right?
Once a year, it'll be 3 this year and potentially 4 next year. So the 3 events are, we kick off the year with logistics. Okay. That's going to be February. We then have Medicarians, which is our age tech senior one. That's in April, towards the end of April. And then in September is when we have our real estate tech event.
Okay, super. And so are you taking a bit from your secret sauce and the playbook you built in the previous slide?
Hope so, right? we hope so. I mean, although that it sounds like if you think about what is in all of our journeys, it's predictable and repeatable. If we can find ways to make things predictable, repeatable, we can do more of them and more scalably. And that is, one of our goals. We've hit, from like if you're a person that is like us, that convenes large scale global events, I don't think the milestone is necessarily go from 7,000 to 70,000. So it really becomes, how do we touch more lives? And for us, touching more lives is connecting more industries in the same way. And what's super interesting is, again, with the overlap, there's almost always some company where they touch multiple verticals. So for us, right, it's a way to try to get more connected as a whole.
So understanding your secret sauce, you have the startup, you have the investors, you have the corporates still coming together, right? To start having those conversations about the future of industry, about how technology is changing that industry, how the investors can invest in those companies, the young ones and the corporate ones, and the corporate finding partners, I guess, to enable their operation and their business.
Exactly. I mean, and I don't think it's at the risk of giving up, sort of like too much, but when we think about our events, you have hit the 3 biggest ones, which is the startups, the investors, and the industry executives, the incumbents. The hardest part about what we do is, no one likes to be first. Everyone wants to be first to be second. And the hardest part of what we do is that, like everything else, scale matters. It's really hard to get to a 7,000, 10,000 person show starting off at a 300 or 500 person show. So what makes the challenge is that everyone thinks about, like in a world of tech, it's super scalable. What do they think about? They think about, well, just go buy ads. Like, what are the scalable activities that make it seem like this is the path to growth? In our type of business, and part of what is, the joy of it, is it's not just about, all right, can you raise a ton of money? Can you hire the largest sales team? Can you build the biggest funnel because you have the largest sales team? It's just not a singular widget that you try to scale across an infinitely large team. At the end of the day, it is about the one-on-one connections. I would say in some ways, right? It is related to if someone is in a scouting role, or if someone is in a venture role, or if you're a startup. A startup is not going to raise money successfully by blanketing LinkedIn with everyone that has the word angel on there. I mean, I can't tell you the number of people that will reach out to me and sort of be like, oh, I see that you've invested in this. Do you want to invest in my startup? I mean, if that works, fantastic. But
yeah, I get a lot of those as well. And the problem is people do not even look at your industries. I mean, you have now 4 industries. I try to focus on just the one, which I master, which is insurance technology. from an investment viewpoint, but then you get everything, the crypto to the, real estate, everything is like, did you read my profile?
Oh my gosh, like how many buzzwords can we put together? It's an AI, cloud, this, that, everything company that also does hardware. Like, okay. But if you think about the world of venture, it's still relationship based. There's a lot of the side, and I mean, I'd say scouting is similar, right? There's a lot of not so glamorous work, and the not so glamorous work is research. It is, what is the universe? Who is out there? What do they do? And then trying to figure out, are they relevant? Could they be relevant? Is it worth having a conversation with? And I think what is so easy to get wrong is that the data itself is a commodity. So you can buy a list of companies, but you're not going to advance your company by buying a big list and trying to mail that big list. Not at all. The only way you're going to do it is saying, is this person relevant? Is this person relevant? And that is the same with venture. It's that personal outreach and trying to understand, what's our goal? If our goal with InsureTech Connect was to have the policyholder benefit, then we have to ask ourselves, is this company, do they play some role in the policyholder's life?
Yeah.
And if the answer is no, then they shouldn't be a priority for us, sort of like right now, and maybe right and maybe never.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing's come to mind is when you look at, the past 2 years and what we've learned from remote working, how have you adapted the business model of your events to fulfill the need of maybe an hybrid person, remote working person, a person who may want to travel to your location, but might also be overseas? How do you reach out to a bigger audience?
I will say that it is making the decision, and I think it's hard for all of us. You have to decide, like, who do you want to be? And sometimes that means accepting that you can't be everything to everyone. And I think, right, the best companies, that's what they do. And certainly in insurance, there isn't anyone that is number one in every line of business, right? There isn't. And so for us, what we have become very passionate about is the face-to-face experience. And because of that, it has hurdles. It has, right, time hurdles, cost hurdles, and those hurdles only get magnified when one is overseas. Oh, so one way that you can sort of, help that is, right, we can take our experience to them. That's usually the most common thing, is at some point in time, like with Manifest, our logistics tech event. It is just had its second year, had a little over 3,000 people. It's on the type of, like industry defining event that gets us just super passionate about what we do. At some point, right, we will want to take this experience overseas, but we're not going to do it by being a media company and doing a whole bunch of webinars and virtual events, because that is just not how we are best suited to make a difference to people's lives.
Yeah, I get that. It's about being in the right place at the right time and actually understanding what makes the whole experience unique for people. Knowing that you will be working with startups, right, as one of the key tech enablers of your conference. Can I ask you what your view is on the recent fall of SVB?
Oh man, I can't wait for either some, it may not be a full-length movie, but there's going to be something. And, I think my, sort of like takeaway is, it comes back to, I would say, the pros and cons of specialization. And it really comes back to knowing your customer. And in this case, I think, right, specialization sort of did them in. So meaning did them in, right? They are a bank that was in many ways singular focused on a hyper connected, sort of network effect industry of startups and venture. And that is the exact thing that helped them grow so much quicker, because a VC knows multiple startups. A startup has multiple other relationships. And so you have this compounding that when things go well is deposits coming into your bank. And it's also in an age of mobile phones, Slack, Discord, pick any of these things, WhatsApp. But the moment things go bad, no one predicted the speed with which the same networks that made them big mobilized to, sort of destroy, sort of the run on the bank. And I think what the real lesson, and the reason I say know your customer is, this is pure conjecture because I am not in finance and in many ways am perfectly qualified to make an absolute speculation. But I think it wasn't that the health of the bank was in trouble, right? They did need to sell, they made certain bets. Obviously, one of the bets was park money at the height of when interest rates were low, in low interest rates environments. We're going to park that money for an extended period of time as well. And, the double whammy was, the first whammy, they're getting low yields on their money. The second whammy was venture took a pause in, this year, part of last year, like it paused. And so instead of natural new accounts, new inflows, people started to use the money they had in the bank.
Yeah.
But they had plenty of money. It was just, hey, we need to, it's like rebalancing your portfolio. You know what? We need to sell some of this over here instead of holding on to it for 10 years. But what they needed to do was before they made that decision, and because that decision had a regulatory filing effect, they should have talked to their customers. And they should have said, you're going to see news about this. It is okay. It is, here's why. This is the same way that they courted them to treat them like family and try to know them in order to get their deposits. They should have trusted them with the information that said, let me tell you what you're going to see so that you aren't surprised. And ultimately, the narrative got away from them, and they would have been fine if they had controlled the narrative versus letting everyone else get spooked.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the days 2015, 2016, actually, when we met, Jay. I had an account executive at SVB taking care of my startups. Literally, any startup which came into my acceleration program who'd get a bank account from them. For sure, there was a due diligence and there was a conversation. So they had very strong processes. What was good for the startups, young startup, tech startup coming into the UK, not only they had the network effect of working with an acceleration program, but then they also had access to the network, SVB provided. And, they've been alive for 40 years. I only knew them, 10 years ago. And so for me, I'd never seen an organization so committed, actually, to the young ventures and doing so much for them. And I just wanted to highlight that too.
Yeah, no, and I think that was what was great, is that they did such a good job of knowing their customer and how to serve them. But they, what they didn't, and when I think about knowing your customer, it was they knew their business, but they didn't think about how to communicate with them and to remember that that same network effect that built them up, it can go both ways. And that's really, I think, what was missing is that understanding that the network could accidentally turn on you. But no, that was what made them so great, was like they took risks on companies when no one else would. They would lend when no one else would. And you don't want to get equity capital super expensive. So if you can get debt, it's wonderful. And so I think it's very sad that, what happened, because it tarnishes what was, I think, a great story for the community and ultimately a key player for innovation.
Yeah, 100% a key player for innovation. And right now, the narrative is, will we have another SVB? We were hoping that investment would start again next quarter. And the sentiment is, we'll have to see, not sure anymore. And so, this lack of investment in new ventures, I was looking, I don't even think there's any new InsureTechs to date, actually, from the database, only the old ones now. The market to grow needs that innovation. And so I just wonder what's going to happen for tech founders in the next few months.
Yeah, I think the good and the bad news, right? It always comes back. There will always be and SVP. Somebody will say, I want to do this. Memory is short, and then hopefully they will remember just how to be a little bit more cautious on the other side. And right, innovation, you can't stop it. And the way the world is, right? It's radical swings. So it's going to be feast, famine, feast, famine. It's just not like slightly incremental down. So it's like we weather out a storm, do it again. We'll weather out a storm, and we'll do it again. So, yes.
So, I mean, looking at that story, looking at Jay now, and I guess the world of Jay is not anymore InsureTech, it's technology for industry. What is keeping you awake at night when you look at all those amazing events you are shaping? How big is the team actually? That is a question I would love to hear, but what's overall keeping you awake at night?
Well, it was hard for me not to want to say my daughter, because she's having a bad period of sleeping right now, and so she's keeping me awake at night. But from a work standpoint, it is all right. Uncertainty is never our friend, and when there's periods of uncertainty, I think about as a live events business, hard enough to get something off the ground, wonderful when it does, and then look, existential threat of COVID, and then. The big worry there was, will tech replace live events? It didn't. So then you start to come back, and then it's recessionary fears. Now, will budgets, sort of do it? Then you try to then say, guess what? Now there's a potential run on the banks. Now many of our customers, do they have money? So there's always something. And I think what we try to do to protect ourselves, against the fact that uncertainty is always there and there's always stress, is to say, are we working on a problem that we think is big enough, interesting enough, and enduring? And that's why we never ultimately did a show in crypto, because it was sort of, don't know that it is enduring in the same way that insurance is enduring, or real estate is enduring, or food is enduring, or people are going to continue to age and need better care than what the world is able to offer today. So can we continue to focus on real things, and hopefully with that end in mind, it will give us the strength to continue to fight through all the stuff that life will throw at you sort of along, the way.
When you look actually at some of the outcomes your delegates receive when they go to your conferences, actually, Jay, can you share with us, what are the outcomes, what are the benefits, what are the things you hear from people once they have gone through the Jay experience?
Right. Once they go through the Jay experience, when is it next year? That's the outcome, right? But in seriousness, part of it is, what do shows do? Shows are at the most mundane level a marketing exercise for companies. That is the ROI of a show is oftentimes judged by, did I meet clients or prospects? But the problem is, clients, prospects is very much like a buyer and a seller, and something that feels too much like I'm either a buyer or a seller is a car lot, and that's sort of the opposite of what you want. You don't want a car lot or a used car lot, because then you're sort of you just don't want to engage, because that the moment you show intent, you're going to get pounced on. You're like, terrible. So when I think about what is it that we really then try to do, strangely enough, there's two things that I really get excited about. One is when somebody comes with a lot of questions and they realize that they're not alone and nobody has the answers. There is something wonderful about realizing, that you're not alone, and that you don't have to, use up precious mental energy solving a problem that hasn't solvable at the moment. And the other one that is really interesting is just inspiration. Can people feel really good about working in that industry? Because there's something magical that, yes, you can have more deals, always good, need those. But imagine coming away feeling energized to do what you do every day. And if we do that across enough people, there's just a collective compounding benefit. So those are, I'd say, two of the intangibles that we really strive for, in addition to, the quantitative components of people meeting the right people so that deals get done.
Well, I remember from, and still today, going through a lot of events. And more so than probably I used to. First, I know that events, when you look at the marketing strategy, still today is the number one place where you can actually meet great relationship, great contacts, because they have that face-to-face engagement. So, that ability to network and connect with people becomes really crucial. That's why, you deciding to focus on the face-to-face and potentially give a digital experience for those post-event that may actually want to see the presentation and the content and maybe convince them to come in the future is very special. But for me, it's often was a space where I have time to learn. When you work at 100 kilometers an hour, going into those 2-3 days of conferences and hiding yourself from people and being able to sit in a conference room and just listen in, it's just so special. And unfortunately, we don't have enough time for that. But what I remember from you on stage is inspirational speech from Jay. And, you even came to do it for me in Hartford. And I was so blessed when you did that. But yes, I can see that brand exposure becomes really key, and finding the best way of doing that and building a relationship as well is a key part of those events.
And I think the best things, like, no one wants to feel like a lead. And it's amazing that at the end of the day, you think about some of the product companies that people love, and they're so passionate about this. They're basically they're a customer. It's they have a transactional relationship with the business, but it doesn't feel that way. And that's always the magic. The joy is the world survives on transactions, but it doesn't grow, right? If you feel like you just have that transactional relationship, and there's really no other way to solve for that than just caring. And, I'm thinking about a company where they have a title of head of wow. What in the world is a head of wow? They're not even sure that they know what a head of wow is, other than like looking and trying to pick apart and say, is this a good experience? And are we treating people the right way? Are we saying the right words? And normally that sits into, a silo of it's in a marketing bucket or a customer experience bucket, versus trying to say, are we delivering something that people are happy with? And takes a different way of thinking.
Yeah, and absolutely. The wow effect, I think some country call it the wow factor effect, a chief wow factor person, to drive this experience. Now, looking at the fact that you have, adjacent industries you are combining together, even though they have their respective event and show. Do you see cross-fertilization? And I know you mentioned insurance touch everything, but when you look at your delegates and your attendees, do you see cross-fertilization around your audience between one event to the other? And could you share with us what you think is the benefit of cross-fertilizing from one sector to the other?
I think oftentimes the answer to your question is yes. When I think about what we try to do, and what makes what we do immensely difficult, is we break down silos. We get together people that don't normally spend time together. If you think about somebody that is in strategy, or somebody that is in claims or underwriting, they just don't get together on a daily basis, and their worlds are very unique. So the hard part is convincing someone that says, oh, in the US, P&C and life, immensely separate. Trying to say to someone that is like, well, I'm in life, I'm not in P&C, why should I go to a show where there's P&C people? It is, until you experience it, it's a big hurdle. So usually what will happen is we'll take a global corporate company like a Pepsi as an example. And Pepsi is, in many ways, we think of them as a food company, but they're also a logistics company. Now, the people that are trying to figure out how to do shelf stability, how to lower sodium, how to create more efficient packaging, is very different than the people that are deciding, do they have robots in their warehouse? Like, what does last mile look like? So that cross-pollination is usually, I'll call it, say, on the logo level. And, even with venture, it's the same thing. So venture, there's sometimes very specialized firms that do only one thing. But even then, it oftentimes will touch multiple segments. And so for us, it's, hi, right? You may remember us from X. Do you happen to have a colleague that might be focusing on Y? Oh, you do? Great. Could we could we pick their brain? Do you think they might want to speak? All of that stuff that we as show people like, to do. And right, if we do it right, it means that we can help grow, make a company better in more than one time a year, and that we can grow more efficient.
Absolutely. And also, I think when you start, being able to be with other people and actually ask questions to those individuals, you end up being able to think about problems slightly differently, right? And then how you solve for example, you mentioned, Pepsi, you think it's just about beverage. No, it's also about logistics. So therefore it's going into supply chain. And if you don't mind me saying, supply chain, now we are trying to solve for supply chain risk, for example, with some of the startup I'm working with now. And so you actually start touching the industry and the logistics sector and the supply chain, and you're actually realizing how blurred all those lines are, and potentially how you could meet everybody in one single place and actually engage in collaborative conversations that potentially are differentiating as well.
Yes. And boy, do I have a good show for your startups.
Yes, yeah. Well, I can't wait, monsieur. I want to ask you, Jay, now, if you have top tips around people, not only about why they should consider event, shows, conferences as a place to learn and meet others, what would be the top tip for anyone considering or not actually liking conferences and trying to really understand why the power of this exists today?
I think there's probably a couple things that, sort of like come to mind. In our world where so much of it is tech, rarely are you going to make a multi-million-dollar decision off of an email, off of a phone call. I mean, even off of a Zoom. As much as it is nice to see, there is, right, you get, right, this much of us, you don't see us in our natural habitat. You don't see the body language, the engagement. And so if you think about, for many things, that's a piece. Another piece of it is what really happens at a show is it's multi-touch. You might see someone on stage, you might go to their booth, you might join one of their social functions. And so you're really developing a relationship, sort of with them. I think the hardest part sometimes is we as people, we don't actually know what's good for us. And so, much of the things that we might want to change about something, if we actually got our way, would make that thing less effective, sort of like for us. And that happens like all the time in life. And I think like the most counterintuitive thing is that the more people that are there, the more productive it can be. So you'll hear as a show grows, people say, oh, I miss when it was intimate. And I think what they're really missing is, can I spend time with who I value the most? But if the goal is to actually be most efficient with your time and see the most and have the industry change the most, you need as big of an experience as possible that's there, right? Disney's theme park is not meant to be done in an afternoon. That's like the equivalent of saying, oh, I wish a show were intimate. It's like saying, I want to go take my kids to a theme park that's only for 2 hours. There's a time and a place for that, but that doesn't stick with you as the memory that you will have when you think about it. So ultimately, the thing that is the onus on us as an organizer, but comes down to the people, is you have to put in a ton of time to figure it out. If you just show up, and that's what a great small show is. You don't have to do any work. You show up, you'll bump into everyone. It's easy. The hard part is when there's a ton of opportunity and you have to figure out, who should I meet? It's just, you have to put in the time in order to get the result.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I would say that I discovered event, I think, through the work you have been doing and the stuff I've been doing with you, actually, because once you actually make commitments to a show and you go to that show every every year you develop relationship, you continue enhancing this relationship, you actually look at the world in some ways very differently. And I mean, fortunately enough, in my case, I was also able to come into your office in New York and whiteboard about what I wanted to see. And so I had a fantastic time as well.
It is the relationships. That's what it's about. When I think back to, right, oh, InsureTech, it isn't the how big did it get? I cannot believe some of the people that are in my life. I cannot believe what I now know about an industry and how I feel for an industry that you might not otherwise do it. That is always like the legacy. But of course, if I didn't feel that way, I'm in the wrong business anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it was like what, 5-6 years of your life as well, right?
Yes.
So you're fluent in insurance now. So anyway, what would be your last word of wisdom for audience, Jay?
Continue to get to know Sabine. How's that? Is that good?
You're so kind. Anything else?
Oh boy, right? How much time do we have? I think today, because of where we are, I think it is just, maybe it's back to the things always take longer than they seem. And so how can you give yourself time to do it so that you don't feel under pressure to make short-term decisions that may be bad for the long run? And that is sometimes it's out of our, sort of like out of our control, but it's just like a startup. Runway is just always key. It is for all of us.
Yeah, very wise words. So where can we find you and where can we find those amazing events you're building?
Well, anyone can reach out to me at Jay at Connectiv, CONNECTIV.com. And all of our stuff is at connectiv.com, and they can reach out to you and you can put them in touch.
Absolutely.
This is what we do. I love getting a chance to connect. I've been super fortunate to talk to thousands of entrepreneurs and investors over the last many years, and trying to see connections get made. Right? That's what inspires us.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And thank you so much for sharing some of your tips as well. Because one thing I know is that relationship with Jay are forever. So I'm very pleased and very humbled to be in your life.
You are stuck with me.
Yes, I am. So, and the details will be as well on the podcast, so people will be able to find you. Well, thank you, Jay, for giving me some of your time today.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you soon.
Can't wait.
If you like this podcast, subscribe now, share with your friends, and if you enjoyed it, please give it a 5-star review. Also, if you want to cover any specific subject with me, contact me on Instagram under Sabine VdL Officials or LinkedIn under Sabine VdL. Thank you.